So we move to item 8, which is petition number 584, 2019, by BE from Germany, bearing 9 signatures on international child abduction in Japan. They're all together? 4 of them. This is also petition 841, 2019, from Italy, concerning international child abduction in Japan also. Petition 842, 2019, by Vincent Fichot from France, concerning, again, international child abduction in Japan. And petition 843, 2019, from Italy, concerning the same topic, international child abduction in Japan. And we have 3 petitioners here. Thank you for coming. It's not easy to come to Brussels, and it's nervous, and everything is bad. But thank you for coming, and please, I don't know how to introduce you. BE from Germany. You have a floor for 5 minutes each petitioner. Please.
Yes, thank you. I would like to share my 5 minutes with Paul Tuja, who is the president of the French Association Savons nos Enfants. I'm a representative of the German-speaking association Japan Child Abduction. Thank you for the opportunity of being here. Thank you for addressing this very, very serious issue that traumatizes little children, and these little children are too young and do not have the ability to speak for them. What I would like to do is I will switch in 2.5 minutes to Paul. I would like to give you a short overview about the effect of child abduction. We have 4 dimensions of child abduction. First of all, we have the international child abduction under the Hague Convention, where my children are, for instance, affected by it. Here I have the passports of Carl and Johan. The return rulings, I have sole custody for these children because my still wife has personality disorders. I have only return rulings. The return rulings are legal in Japan in September 2018. However, nothing has happened until now. There had been 3 attempts for indirect enforcement, 3 attempts for direct enforcement. Still, the kids are not repatriated. I'm very worried about my kids. I am afraid that my wife might commit suicide with them. Unfortunately. The German FBI and Interpol have confirmed that the files for missing persons for Carl and Johan have not even touched until now. German Foreign Office has launched a travel and security warning, but this is just one dimension. The other dimensions are the people who have visitation and access ruling by a Japanese court who do not even normally see their kids again. For instance, we have the case of Dr. Daniel Willem, his daughter Shoko Marles. He has a very, very extended visitation and access right. However, his daughter has not seen her father for 3.5 years. The third dimension of the phenomenon of international child abduction are the domestic cases. For instance, we have here as an example Tommaso Perina, whose kids got abducted in Japan, so it's not an international case but a domestic one. However, his kids, Marcello and Sofia, were not able to see his father for 2.5 years now. And the fourth dimension is the prevention cases. We have so many parents who call us, who contact us, who desperately are so afraid that their children might get abducted. When I was threatened by my wife, when she said, if you separate, you will never see your children again. That was in 2014. My kids got abducted in 2017. I fought 3 years against the abduction of my children to Japan. We desperately all need your help. Until the end of World War II, we have already a 4-digit number. Over 1,000 children get abducted from Europe to Japan. We have to do something. These little children need our help, and therefore I would like to pass.
Thank you for your time. I'm the president of French organization Savons nos Enfants Japon and a strong translator in Japanese language for French court. The issue we're discussing today is not about a spouse dispute. It's neither father's or mother's right. It's about a country violating the fundamental right of children to have access to both of their parents. Violation of the UN Convention of Children's Rights is explicit by Japan. An abductor will be granted full custody, and the left-behind parent will be provided a mere 2 to 3 hours of visitation right per month, which is less than kids should spend on brushing their teeth every month. Additionally, visitation will be refused. For the Hague Convention, ratified by Japan in 2014, on May 2018, the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Federation Bar of Association of Japan organized a seminar in Paris to educate and incite the citizens living in France how to legalize an abduction using the Hague. All explained methods can be used from other EU countries. You could be the sole living parent in Japan, still, you won't have access to your children. As we are talking right now, a French father living in Tokyo got his kids abducted 3 weeks ago. He will be kicked out of Japan in 3 more weeks. Why? Because the Japanese spouse visa is similar to the Qatari system of sponsor. If he doesn't get a letter from his wife, he won't be able to renew his visa. Another French parent is detained in custody right now after being forced to divorce in Japan, after being deprived of all his legal rights. All our allies, Australia, Canada, the USA, and the UK, are facing the same situation.
Thank you for your intervention. So let me first give the floor to all petitioners, and then we'll try to react. Paul George Tuya, co-petitioner. Ah, it was you. Okay, you shared. Vincent Fichot. Yes, please, floor is yours.
Well, first of all, let me thank the member of the Parliament, the Commission, especially Ignazio Corrao of Italy and Geoffroy Didier of France, who have expressed a very keen interest on defending our children's rights. And I wanted to thank them for standing up for our children. My name is Vincent Fichot. My children were abducted 559 days ago from within Japan. I am not an international abduction, I'm a local abduction. My children all have French, and they also have the French nationality. The last time I saw my daughter was from a footage of a CCTV recording showing my wife locking my daughter in the trunk of the car. She was 11 months old in the middle of the summer and drove away with my baby still in the trunk. I went to the police 4 times. I went to the public prosecutor twice. And each and every time I tried to claim child abduction and child abuse, the police and the prosecutor refused to take that into account. As a matter of fact, the police was so annoyed at me that when I informed them that I would try to find my abducted children by myself, even in the presence of my lawyer, they threatened me of arrest on kidnapping attempt. I've asked the Family Court of Tokyo and the High Court of Tokyo for my children to meet with child psychiatric experts and as well as parental alienation experts. Parental alienation has been classified as a disease by the World Health Organization last year. The French consulate in Tokyo, who's trying really hard to defend my children, called my wife, her lawyer, and the Japanese police on multiple occasions to merely assert whether my children were alive or not. Each and every attempt was a failure. The Japanese authorities have done nothing and have made it even more difficult for the French authorities to find out about the whereabouts of my kidnapped children. In Japan, human rights are totally ignored. The rule of law is not applied. We filed a petition to the United Nations against the state of Japan in August of last year, demonstrating that Japan was not respecting the Convention on Rights of Children. To demonstrate the hypocrisy of the Japanese authorities, I would like to highlight 2 dates. On November 21st, the Japanese ambassador to the United Nations publicly claimed that to celebrate the 25 years of the ratification of the Convention of the Rights of Children, Japan was pledging to fulfill its obligation. 25 years later, 24 hours later, a judge in Tokyo ruled that the United Nations Convention on Rights of Children had no binding power in Japan. In other words, the Japanese are actively engaging in double-speaking, pretending publicly that they respect human rights, granting them access to the EPA, the SPA, a seat at the G7 table, part of the big boss club. But internally, they do nothing. They are lying to their trading partners, they are trading to their allies. The psychological impact it has on our children is substantial. There are undeniable and multiple studies, scientific studies, showing the long-lasting impact, psychological and physical, it has on our children. The WHO has classified that as a disease. And yet, when you ask a court in Japan to have your children meet with a psychiatric expert, this is being refused. It's like knowing that your child has a cancer and that the authorities of the country you live in refuse knowingly to diagnose them and to treat them. This is an inhuman treatment of our children. Our children must come back. They must come back to an environment that will cater for them, that will respect their best interests, which is to spend time with mom and dad, which is not to be alienated from their culture. They need to be in an environment where they can mend psychologically and physically. Our children have become orphans of Europe. They no longer speak our language. They can no longer practice their religion. They can no longer go back to their home country to visit their dying grandparents. How can we accept that? In Europe, integration is such a pillar of the culture. When non-European citizens come to Europe, we do everything we can to maintain their cultural identity. This committee must do everything it can to apply the same rights to our children outside of its borders, especially in a country that calls itself a friend of Europe. In light of the Japanese bad faith, and despite the multiple attempts of France, Italy, Germany, the European Union, to make sure that our children's rights are fully respected, there's been zero response from the Japanese government. As a result, we are calling for sanctions. We have been dealing with Japan for years, if not decades, and nothing has happened. They are laughing at our faces. Last year in Parliament, 2 years ago in Parliament, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs even said that they didn't care about the Goldman Act that the US could potentially apply to punish international child abduction because the US would never apply any sanction. They are laughing at our faces. In terms of sanction, we're asking 3 of them. The first one is we're calling for the immediate suspension of the strategic partnership agreement. In March 2018, the 26 ambassadors to Tokyo signed and sent a letter to the Minister of Justice of Japan saying that it should apply and respect the CRC, the Convention on Rights of Children. This was an acknowledgement that Japan was not respecting the rule of law and human rights. And yet again, a few months later, Europe signed the strategic partnership agreement, which stipulates that both parties should respect the rule of law and human rights. We need to fix this. The second sanction is for the immediate requirement for visa for any Japanese citizen coming to Europe. We can no longer accept the citizen of a nation that abducts our children in total impunity with the full support of the authorities. We need to send a strong signal to Japan that we will not let these crimes unpunished. The third one, and using the lead of Italy, we're requesting all member states present in Japan to publish a travel warning on their website informing their citizens of the risk of child abduction should they visit or settle in Japan. We can no longer accept new children to be abducted. If these measures had been taken years ago, our children would not have been abducted. It is time for action. Now, I would like to finish saying that many times lawmakers say to me, Japan is sovereign. Yes, Japan is sovereign, but so is Europe when it comes to deciding the nature of its economic and diplomatic relationship it wants with Japan. We have to make a call. We can let the Japanese do whatever they want in their country, but we can also defend our interests with the tools that we have available. Thank you very much.
Sorry, I turned it off, sorry. Thank you very much for sharing your stories. Okay, I have 3 petitioners in the list, but you are 4, so please, if you want to have a floor. Yes, please. But introduce yourself, sorry, as I don't have you in the list.
Yeah, mine is 0841. Okay. Thank you for your time today. My name is Tommaso Perina. I'm an Italian citizen, and I live, studied, and work in Japan since 2003. My 2 children were kidnapped within Japan by their Japanese mother on December 19, 2016. 1,150 days ago, and I've seen them since August 20th, 2017, which is 902 days today. I'm still married to my wife. I have no protection orders or access restrictions of any kind towards both my 2 children and wife. I have full parental rights to see my children anytime I want if I were living in a country that respects human and children's rights. I have 2 rulings in favor of visitation that my wife has arbitrarily decided without total impunity to not respect. I challenge family courts, high courts for custody, providing to judges parental plans, including children full access to their mother in order to save them from alienation. Everything I did was in vain. My children, as other millions of Japanese minors and thousands of European children, are not going to come back. Corrupted Japanese courts that have all the interest to keep running the so-called disputed children business, going on since decades, have done nothing to try to save my children from alienation. Neither Japanese authority is. I went to police in Tokyo twice, claiming child abduction and asked it to start an investigation, but the only thing I got back is a laugh in my face, telling me that in Japan it's not considered a crime to kidnap your own children. Though, even in presence of my lawyer, I was threatened of arrest and prosecution for kidnapping. Attempt, shall I try to find my children. The Italian consulate attempts to contact my wife and police several times, but Japan, breaching the Vienna Treaty, didn't reply, not one time. Italian authorities also tried several occasions, but in vain, to have the rights of my children respected. In 2018, October, Minister of Family Lorenzo Fontana wrote a letter to Minister of Justice Yamashita. The letter is still today without a response. April 2019, President of the Italian Republic, Sergio Mattarella, while Abe was visiting Italy, expressed his concern of the Italian children kidnapped in Japan. Nothing happened. In June last year, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Moavero, was visiting Japan. He brought the issue of the Italian children and the Italian parents with rights not respected in Japan. Nothing happened. During the G20 in Osaka, Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte, during the G20, mentioned also in an interview the dramatic situation of the Italian children abducted in Japan. He pleaded the issue to Abe. The only response he got back was that Abe cannot do anything because he has no power on his judges. November last year, during the P20, Vice President of the Chamber of Deputies Mara Carfagna and the Italian Vice President of the Senate Ignazio La Russa, while in Japan, expressed to their representative Japanese colleague, Mr. Ogawa, their concerning about the Italian parents and children rights not respected in Japan. Everything done, but zero result. Japan is a rugged nation. Consular protection at the Vienna Convention not respected, with inability from our embassies to even assert whether our children are still alive. How can you call Japan a friendly country? Police is fully supportive of abduction, refusing to intervene when the children are first abducted, but have threatened us with prosecution, even in the presence of our lawyers, when we then inform them that we would go and bring them back. Judges grant custody to the abducting parents, violating the CRC Article 3 to act on the best interest of the children, as well as Article 35. States parties shall take all appropriate national, bilateral and multilateral measures to prevent the abduction, the sale or traffic of children of any purpose or in any form. Japanese government has no intention to respect their CRC. And this shows the very bad faith of Japanese authorities. Enforcement in Japan doesn't exist. As I mentioned early on, my 2 monthly hours visitation rights are not respected without any consequences nor change of custody. Consequences are total alienation of the European children, unable to speak their own language, unable to connect with their European cultural background, unable to meet with half of their family, half of their identity is erased with the full support of Japanese authorities. These children are no longer European. They are the victim of a state-sponsored abductor scheme that facilitates the total alienation of the European cultural identity. This cannot be accepted by a member of the G7. Europe has been aware of this issue, and yet signed the SPA first and then the EPA. SPA was signed in 2019, even though there was a full recognition of Europe and member states about the crimes committed by Japanese authorities on European minors. So today, I would like to ask you if Europe prioritizes business with Japan or prioritizes the children's rights, European children's rights. In light of the Japanese bad faith that has permitted them to commit crimes in total impunity on European children that has lasted for decades, we urge this institution to apply immediate sanctions against the state of Japan. Let us remind you that if the right measure had been taken years ago, our children would not have been victims of this tremendous crimes. We ask for three things. First, we call for immediate suspension of the SPA. As Vincent mentioned, on March 2018, all 26 ambassadors to Japan signed and sent a démarche to the Japanese Minister of Justice, stressing that Japan should respect the CRC in an acknowledgement that Japan was failing to apply the rule of law and human rights as prescribed by the CRC. Nothing has changed since. But yet, a few months later, European Parliament ratified the SPA that states that member parties should respect the rule of law and human rights. Second, requirement visa for all Japanese citizens traveling to Europe. And third, as my country, Italy, took the lead, we request that warning messages be posted on which website of the member states of foreign affairs and embassies, as well as the European delegation to Tokyo, to inform the risk that European children are going to face. Japan is fooling for decades the rest of the world, giving the impression of being a country that respects the CRC and making promises never honoured, gaining time, lying in bad faith, while thousands of European children have lost their European identity, their European parent, and the culture. We are desperate. Please help our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We tried, Secretariat tried to contact representatives. We have Croatian presidents?
Yes.
Great. But we will start from the Commission, and I will give the floor to the representative of the Commission, Mrs. Patricia de Luca. Where are you?
Yeah, I'm here. Thank you, Chair. First of all, the Commission would like to express its understanding for the difficult situation of the petitioner deprived of all contacts with their children. The Commission is fully aware of the situation in Japan concerning both the return of the child to his or her habitual residence after an abduction and the impossibility of exercising visiting rights, even if these visiting rights have been granted by a court. We also know that shared custody is not applied in Japan, so it's only one parent that who has the full custody of the child. It is worth to remind here that the situation is similar also for Japanese citizens. For instance, if the wife who has custody of the child remarries, the child from the previous union can be adopted by the new spouse without even notifying the non-custodial biological parent. This is unbelievable in our legal culture, but it is fully in line with the so-called non-intervention principle. As in Japan, civil matters are considered basically private matters, and the state interference is perceived as intrusive in this matter. Therefore, the consequence is the lack of enforcement of civil judicial decision. So several initiatives have been taken so far in order to raise awareness of the Japanese authorities of this problem. The petitioner have recalled some, as the letter of the 26 ambassador, and also intervention at political level. After the letter of the EU ambassador, the former Commissioner for Justice, Vera Jourova, wrote to the former Minister Yoko Kamikawa in 2018. No answer was ever received. Then the EU delegation in Tokyo tried to organize a meeting with the Minister Takashi Yamashita in 2019 with all ambassadors also of the member state. This meeting did not take place, but the minister had a meeting with the head of the EU delegation. In order, it was, let's say, an important meeting in order to keep the dialogue open, but nothing happened. So in June 2019, the French President Macron, Italian President Conte, and others informed the Prime Minister of Japan. Also, nothing happened. Now we have a new Minister of Justice since October, Masako Mori. We will try to contact with her to see if she is more forthcoming than the others. Following international pressure, because you know that also other states has the same problem like US, Australia and so on. Japan issued a new legislation, is the Civil Execution Act, in order to render enforcement of civil decision easier, but we have doubts on the functioning of this legislation, which has not yet entered into force. It will enter into force in this year in April. Now, we have recalled the strategic partnership agreement. On the 31st of January, there was the second meeting with the Japan authorities. I have to say that this agreement is not yet entered into force because it's lacking ratification by all member states, but some parts of the agreement are provisionally applied. The part on civil justice cooperation is not provisionally applied, but the part on human rights is. So we have raised the issue under the human rights part, asking about the functioning of this new international mediation scheme introduced by the Central Authority of Japan, which is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. We asked about statistics, how many children have been returned to their habitual residence after the introduction of this scheme. Well, I have to say that the answers were not very satisfactory, but we will have still two dialogue. We have not under the disagreement, but under the human rights dialogue, and there will be a EU-Japan summit in Tokyo in May. So we will continue to raise the issue and to try to have a concrete answer. In the 30th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child this year, the EU delegation in Japan has also tried to raise awareness of the issue and publish an article on the problems of European citizens in Japan. But as I said, there is really a problem both of respecting international conventions like the A Convention or the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and also a difference in our culture, no? Because for us, the best interest of the child is that the child, even after a separation, can be allowed to have contact with both parents. For them, the child should not be disturbed by the parent who has not custody because of this principle of continuity in its life. So we think that it's good to keep the dialogue open. We are thinking at the EU démarche, the EU diplomatic démarche, maybe also with like-minded countries as the US and others, in order to continue to raise this issue with Japan. In relation to the sanction, I cannot answer because it's not my role. Sanctions have to be decided at the council level by all member states. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. And now I'm delighted to give the floor to European Parliament's coordinator on children's rights, Mrs. Eva Kopic. Thanks to her Parliament always respects children's rights, and we are trying to work according to their best interest. So please, floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will speak Polish. Szanowni Państwo.
Ladies and gentlemen, what we have just heard were testimonies of parents who for the last years have been living with the feeling of hopelessness. They know they have not many ways left open. They have certain rights granted by courts in the EU, but also in some cases by the Japanese court, which unfortunately, for many reasons, have not been respected or implemented by the Japanese authorities. Each and every one of us sitting in this room can imagine the situation, can imagine how difficult it is to live, not seeing your children, not knowing where they are, not knowing how they feel, whether they are happy or sad. Some of the petitioners that we have with us in the room today, back in 2018, submitted their first petitions, or rather requests, to the coordinator's office. And I am extremely saddened that these cases have not been resolved so far, even though there were various interventions that were undertaken, sometimes at very high diplomatic levels. Today we have very specific petitions in front of us. I do realize it's not only those petitions, it's a systemic problem that arises from certain maybe issues related to law, but also Japanese culture. The lack of possibility to exercise shared custody after divorce, but also lack of possibility to exercise the visits is detrimental. First of all, detrimental to the child itself. The child loses not only the other parent, it loses contact with the culture, with the language that forms part of its culture. Parents across the world, in the EU, in America, Australia, but also the Japanese themselves, have to face similar problems. After you get divorced from your Japanese partner, you have usually very limited contact with your children. Sometimes it's basically a zero contact. As a person responsible for children's rights in the European Parliament, I would like to emphasize the following. I will always deplore the non-respect of rights and responsibilities by any state, rights and responsibilities that are written into Convention on Children's Rights. It doesn't matter if it's a EU state or any other state across the world. If a given country says it's democratic, it's civilized, it has to stick to the court decisions that have been issued. Both parents, unless there is violence obviously involved. In any other case, any parent in a situation where the well-being of a child is at stake has the right to keep in touch, to make sure that a true relationship, parent-child relationship, is developed. It's extremely important for any child, not only a small child, but also a teenager, and also going forward when a teenager becomes an adult. At this, in this moment, we are basically awaiting changes to the Japanese law that will be introduced in several months that should ultimately allow repatriation after child abduction. The question is whether these changes will be effective. Unfortunately, we've heard voices of experts that were questioning the efficiency of the new regulations. However, I think dialogue is very important. That's why any issues related to parental obligations should be high on our agendas. Also, when it comes to exchange of views with any authorities from the Japanese side. I spoke to representatives of the delegation, EU-Japan delegation in the European Parliament, so I hope that this issue will be well known to its members. I will make sure that during the upcoming meeting, interparliamentary meeting of the EU delegation and the Japanese delegation, this issue should be mentioned. I've also used this opportunity to speak to the High Representative of the EU when it comes to security and foreign affairs, because I want to make sure that this issue is mentioned as part of the talks that are now being held when it comes to the new strategic partnership with Japan. I know that the French Senate also approached the European Commission with the same. I hope that the response will be positive. Ladies and gentlemen, contacts when it comes to parental issues, family issues, especially when it comes to child abduction or custody following a divorce, these issues are actually one of the main tasks with which our bureau, my office, deals with. That's why I can assure you that it's very important for me. It's a first meeting when I'm speaking as the coordinator. So first of all, I would like to thank you for inviting me to today's meeting of the Petitions Committee. I just wanted to say that I hope that we will not have to meet very often, because there won't be so many cases when it comes to children's rights, although I know that the reality looks completely different. You know how many petitions are being sent to the European Parliament in this area. I have to also express my deepest feelings related to those petitions, as well as letters sent to my office. I think that we should protect the rights of children, of citizens living in the EU. It's our main task, cooperation at the political level, but also at the administrative level when it comes to children's rights. It's based on the decision of the European Parliament's Bureau. And I can assure you as members of the committee, but also as petitioners, that I will remain for your disposal when it comes to cooperation on these issues. I really hope that the upcoming months will help us create an efficient mechanism to exchange information on those very sensitive and difficult issues. The doors to my office remain open to each and every one of you, to anyone who wants to speak about protection and promotion of children's rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kopacz. Now I would like to open the floor to the members if somebody wants to have floor. If no, I will, for the beginning, do it myself. Sorry, just in 2 minutes, yes. It's absolutely unbelievable what I've heard now. I understand that this is kind of lack in education, you know, we all read in historical books that back in 17th century, Dutch merchants in Nagasaki, but they will not, as you know, they were not allowed to leave certain part of the city, and this they got a child with Japanese woman. This child was supposed to stay in Japan forever, but I could never imagine that it can happen now in 21st century. And basically this, all the speeches, it was like description of efforts of European Union, which so far leads to zero result, which is very sad. And of course, there is no way to close this petition. We have to keep them open. I believe this is consensus in this room. And of course, what is missing there is strong position of European Parliament. I understand that many governments of member states were dealing with this thing, and High Representative and European Commission, but not European Parliament. I believe that we have to sit down and to think how to make this position. And another proposal would be, of course, to invite High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy to come back to this committee and to say what exactly can be done. But this is my short remark. Please, Mrs. Evi. Oh, sorry, I just saw her first. Okay. I'm sorry. So, yes.
I go first? Okay. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Several months ago, we have denounced these particular and worrying conditions which affect European children and parents in Japan. Despite the efforts done by MEPs, foreign ministers and governments, we're not seeing any progress. Even if the Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on 20 January declared the 2020 as a crucial year to establish a new era of Japanese diplomacy, during his speech before the Diet at the National Bicameral Legislature of Japan, vowing to tackle international issues head-on, nothing is happening. We cannot accept the ongoing situation with more than 100 French kids and 1,000 European kids that are retained without any contact with their European parents or families. This is the case, for example, of Vincent and Tommaso, who contacted us with the need and hope of having concrete answers, who are here with us today and whose terrible stories we could all hear. What do we have to do? We should perhaps regret having voted in favor of the agreements with Japan? Or do we have to ask the Commissions to work on a review of the mentioned SPA and EPA for violation of the human rights clause? Because it is a huge violation of the human rights and the International Convention of the Rights of Children. I wish that the Commission will use all the instruments available to find a quick agreement with Japan, exploiting all the possibilities through a constant pressure on the Japanese government, and maybe touch where it hurts and makes noise, so the money, the commercial relations. I would remind that Japan is also going to host this year the Olympic and Paralympic Games in summer, an event that will draw the attentions of millions of people around the world with an important media impact. This is just an example of instruments that the European Union institutions could have to put pressure on the Japanese authorities. Many parents, mostly Italian, Germans and French, are tired to wait for the recognitions of the problem. They expect, in short, concrete actions, support and help from the European Union. I put myself in fathers' shoes that have been deprived of their simple rights because of their nationality. It is not acceptable. Me, as a father, I could not wait 1 minute more, and I fully understand your struggle. And for us, it is really time to act, not to speak.
Thank you. So let's come to this right turn. Mr. Vincent, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I think it's really a very touching stories that we heard from the petitioners, and I thank you for being here and sharing with us. Many things have been said, but it's, I believe, very striking from the point of view of the European Union. Not only there is no solution foreseen, but for the moment we have no proper answer from the Japan authorities. So, if I understood well, no written, no oral answer addressed ever on the EU-Japan dialogue this topic, and this means that we are not. It is impossible to find a solution for the moment because we don't see a dialogue that would bring some steps forward in this relationship. I think even our heads of states and governments did good things, the French and the Italian government namely, but maybe it should be strengthened, the cooperation between the member states that have this same interest, and to put pressure on the Japanese government. I think us as Petition Committee and the European Parliament, what can we do? This is the question. How can we help the petitioners? And I welcome the proposals that Eva Kopacz had in her intervention. What we can further do is to signal to our Japanese delegation of the European Parliament that in the upcoming summit that they will be, I'm sure, involved in May, they would raise this topic as mandate on behalf of the Petition Committee and the European Parliament. And I also support the proposal of the Chair to try to have an own initiative report to signal that the European Parliament as a whole is really concerned on this matter, and we would like to have solutions as soon as possible. Of course, understanding the cultural differences and so on, but we live still in a civilized world, and the Japanese part of the leading economies of the world, and this has also responsibilities in terms of human rights and children's rights. So I very much support all the initiative that would be taken by us in the European Parliament, and I express again my sympathy with the petitioners. Thank you very much.
Thank you much indeed. Next speaker, Madam Maestre.
Gracias, señor presidente. Lo primero.
Thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I would like to express full support to the petitioners and also underline that we are very much involved in the petition. We've been collecting together all of the information that you've sent in, and I completely agree with the messages that my colleagues have sent to you, colleagues from the Commission, that the Parliament also has to do something. Now, we can't use excuses of traditions or cultural elements. Culture or tradition is not an excuse to violate the rights of both children, but also parents who have the right to have contact with their children. So please count on our support. And similarly to what my colleagues were saying, and I completely agree with what Madame Kopak has just said, following along from what my colleague Vince said, that we would like to have an initiative report, not just about this case or these cases, which are examples of violent violations of the rights of children, but we also need to make sure that all institutions know this. The Human Rights Defender, the Committee on Human Rights, the committees or the delegation on relations with Japan. If we can work on a report, an initiative report, which will highlight this, which will make sure that people can see, all member states need to know about these violations of human rights, because together we are stronger. And in the case of marriages in Japan or anyone that has similar situations, we have to understand what's happening. We can't look down. And so please understand you have our support. We are fully committed to doing more. It's not just that you have our support, but please, if you have any other initiatives, any further information on what's happening, please let us know, and we will do everything we can to help.
Madam Maestre. Next speaker, Madam Deputy Tatiana Zdanoka. Take the floor, please.
Thank you. And many thanks bringing this case to us. For me, it was a secret. I did not know the problem. And it means that there is a shortage on submitting this problem to public. Since we here in the Committee of Petitions, we are dealing very much with the problems of child abduction in different situations within for transnational marriages and within EU member states, also with other third countries. But no any information. Also, as a scientist, I have good relations with Japan as a mathematician, but I never have heard about this problem. And therefore, I first of all want to also repeat and to support all proposals to have to write to the delegation to give it this information known to all EU parliamentarians, all MEPs, but also just to work with the press. And first request is to you, to people concerned, to parents, to fathers, to make it known for public, and full support to you, of course.
Paldies, thank you. And next speaker, Madam Deputy Evi.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I also wanted to take the floor to defend this petition and really reiterate what other colleagues have said already. I have to say that, yes, the petitioners were presenting their stories, and during their presentation, I was extremely uncomfortable. It was something that was very difficult emotionally to listen to. It's awful, and I do want to express, therefore, that I stand with the petitioners and feel very close to them. I think it is absolutely unacceptable for the situation to be dragged out like this. after all of the letters, statements, everything that has been done across the board, up all of the levels, and nothing has been done. This is extremely serious, and therefore, to reiterate what my colleague Mr. Corrao said, we are going to have to continue, yes, with dialogue, diplomacy, write new letters to bring in new and different EU representatives, the Croatian presidency that should take this issue up, obviously, the delegation at the European Parliament for relations with Japan. All of this, letters, everything from the petition committee. I'm asking the committee to write a letter in support of this. But I don't think that we can do via sanctions. We should use our trade agreements to uphold human rights and carry out all of the clauses for the trade agreements, human rights. But I think it's time now for the European Union to state just how united it is, that it is speaking with one voice to defend these fundamental rights, not just children, but also the parents that are victims of this, and that we can see that these are perpetrated.
And
thank you, Ms. Sevi.
Mr. Deputy Agius Saliba, take the floor, please.
Just like my colleagues, first of all, total support to the petitioners present today. It is very emotional and very shocking to hear their stories. However, we must note that this committee, the Petitions Committee, in 2016 proposed a resolution on similar problems. Problems we had observed not as regards Japan only, but also other third countries, as regards these issues and the implementation of Brussels 2A, this regulation. Therefore, now it's important that we take action, and from resolutions we move on, and these parents whose children, although they do not live in an EU member state, are still EU citizens. So we need to give them a solution, and at the end of the day, we have to protect them. Therefore, as the group of Socialists and Democrats, we support this petition, and we also ask that at the end of the day, through the High Representative, Mr. Borrell, we create more pressure so that these cases and other cases where European children and parents from Europe who are going through these unhappy situations are given a solution ASAP. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Agius Saliba. And last speaker, in my mother language, few words. Całkowicie zgadzam się z panią przewodniczącą.
I agree with Mrs. Maestre completely. I believe that we do respect cultural differences, civilization differences of our partners. Yes, we do that. However, these should not become a sort of an excuse to infringe parental rights, the rights of parents from the EU member states. And this is absolutely fundamental. I believe that we agree on that completely in our committee. I also believe that in this context, we should have an official letter to the High Representative from the European Commission, to Mr. Borrell. This is within his job description. It is his responsibility. Diplomatic pressure should not be just about the European Parliament. No, it should be in particular on the level of the EU diplomacy, on the level of the EU External Action Service.
Authors of petition, 2 minutes for each. Take a floor, please.
Thank you very much. To avoid any misunderstanding, I would like to clarify a few points. Number one, while you only have fathers in front of you, mothers are being concerned. In fact, in our petition, we also have one French mother. As of today, we have allies, like Australian mother being separated from the children. Number two, what is being put under the cultural aspect of Japan is an excuse. If we take the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, the act of causing serious mental harm is qualified as a genocide. On May 2019, the World Health Organization recognized parental alienation as a mental health problem. Abducted children are exposed to alienating behavior on a daily basis. According to estimate, 150,000 children are deprived of any links with their parents each year in Japan. Over the last 20 years, it makes a total of 3 million children. The age of majority is 20 in Japan. The reason for which most authorities weren't aware of the situation is due to the fact that Japanese judges will use a specific rhetoric to justify, to legalize an abduction. You can read Japanese rulings. We never talk about abduction. They do admit the situation, but they will not condemn it.
Just as a very, very short addition, the case of my two sons is the clearest and cleanest hate case that has ever been since Japan has ratified the convention. I have sole custody under, well, worldwide law. I have only return rulings, indirect enforcement, direct enforcement, everything. You cannot win more in Japan. However, my children are still not repatriated yet. This is unacceptable for a civilized nation like Japan is claiming to be.
Well, again, I'm probably not going to see my children for the next 15 years, 20 years. I'm pretty certain of that. But I know that whenever they will watch that video, they'll be thankful to you. So on behalf of my children and myself, thank you very much. I would like to highlight that time is of essence. Our children are victims of a crime. Parental alienation is child abuse. We cannot afford to wait for the next joint committee to take place. Actions need to be immediate. Action should have taken place yesterday. They are suffering right now, and we cannot wait another day. I would like to disagree with the fact that I've heard again today that it's part of the Japanese, there are differences in the culture. If you have cultural differences, why do you go and sign an international treaty? Japan ratified the UN Convention on Rights of Children. It took 10 years for that convention to be ratified across all state members. If it's not aligned with your national standards, don't go sign it and pretend to be a country that respects children's rights. Full stop. Japan is bound to respect the treaty it signed with all member states. That begs the question as well that if Japan cannot respect the most fundamental children's rights as defined by the Convention on Rights of Children, what does this parliament think about respecting the economic partnership agreement the next time the financial crisis hits us? If they can't respect the rights of a child, why would they respect a trade agreement when they cannot afford it? I would be very concerned as a European lawmakers about the ability of Japan to respect any agreements. That's it. Again, thank you very much, but we need to sort that out ASAP, and do not trust the Japanese authorities when they tell you that they're looking into the issues. They've been telling that for the last 20 years. They need a slap on the wrist. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I would just like to add one little thing. We are out of option, and really we cannot do anything. We have parental rights, but if we try to visit our kids tomorrow and we show up in front of they leave, police will come and will put us in jail, like happened to an Australian father a few months ago. He was in jail for 45 days just for enter a common space in a condominium. So we are their parents, we are their DNA, but we cannot see them. And we are threatened to be put in jail or punished, and everything we will do will be used against us in court. So we really have no hope. And if you do something for us, please do it quickly, because kids grow up and we are sure they already forget who the European parents are. Thank you. We are very desperate.
Thank you very much indeed. It was very impressive. Now I propose very concrete steps. Firstly, we should open the procedure. Secondly, we should, in my opinion, write to the EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs to ask for action, for concrete action on this issue. Thirdly, we can write to the Japanese delegation to the EU, to the ambassador of Japan. And finally, I propose to adopt a short motion for resolution on this issue. If you agree, or somebody?
Yes, we are in a total agreement on behalf of SND.
Yes, also the EPP totally supports. We should organize already at the next plenary in February to ask the point on the agenda for debate and adoption of a resolution, and also inform our Japan parliamentary delegation here in the European Parliament about this issue. Thank you.
Thank you for this support. Please, Chairman, take the floor. Ignazio, prego.
Yes, I totally agree with the colleagues, but just because it's very, very quick, we cannot wait all the time of the EU-Japan delegation. So I think we can also ask the President of the European Parliament, Sassoli, we later signed with all the MEPs that heard the discussion today, to take action with the Commission rapidly, because this is a matter with, if we put in place the sanctions team on the EPA and the SPA, that can make the Japanese government to reply quickly. I think we can't wait the time of the EU-Japan delegation, the next plenary. We can work, but if we can accelerate with the President of the Parliament to raise the awareness and ask with the Commission to work on the sanctions, that could be quicker. We can do both things. Co-sign a letter and ask the... Okay.
Okay, you're right. We can inform about the situation the President of European Parliament and obviously take a floor about it during next plenary session. Okay, thank you. Thank you. It's the end of our meeting. Have a nice lunch. Thank you. Bye.